Okay, I am back after a long break with my 250th video. And I decided instead of just doing another thing where I just eat food with music playing, I want to do something special. So, about a year or so ago, I started rewatching the 100. And as I was watching it, something I had wondered about in the past, I decided I actually wanted to get an answer for. And that is, how many people of the human race actually transcend in the series finale? So what I decided to do was rewatch the show and look up any information I could online through wikis or art interviews with cast and crew or just any type of blog I can find talking about the population numbers to answer the question. So what I did was I divided all the characters up into 10 different groups. And so I decided to go basically do my best to figure out how many from each group died each season until we got to the final episode of the show to figure out how many transcended by the time we actually get to that in the final episode. So I'm just going to go through each group really quickly, kind of going through the story and just talking about significant characters that are killed, as well as giving my best estimates and reasons why I think a certain amount of people died from each season to answer the question, how many characters transcended in the series finale? So with that, let's get into it. Okay, so the first group I'm going to talk about is the delinquents. Now, when the season 1 begins, 100 juvenile delinquents that were prisoners on the Ark are sent to the ground. But I'm also going to include Bellamy Blake and Raven Reyes in the count of delinquents because it's 102. So the first half of season 1, we know for a fact 10 delinquents are killed. Significant kills include Adam, who is exposed to acid fog and is stabbed by Clark to be put out of his misery. Then Wells Jaha is also stabbed by Charlotte, and then later Charlotte commits suicide by jumping off a cliff. Then, in the second half of the season, the plot essentially is the delinquents have to survive after they use the flares from Raven's escape pod, how she got to Earth, accidentally burned down a tree crew grounder village. So, 36 more delinquents are killed in the second half of the season, most of which are in the finale when they're fighting tree crew grounders. The only significant kill, though, in part 2 of season 1 is Dax, who was stabbed in the neck after a fight between him and Bellamy and Clark, after he was told to kill Bellamy to silence the fact that he was given a gun to kill Chancellor Jaha. So when season 1 ends, 46 of the 102 delinquents have died, meaning just 56 are still alive. In season 2, from what I can tell, 8 more delinquents are killed. The plot of season 2 is most of the surviving delinquents are taken to Mount Weather, so the Sky People have to work together with the Grounder clans to rescue the Sky People and any Grounders that are taken captive by Mount Weather. In part 1 of season 2, 3 delinquents are killed. Significant kills include Sterling, who fell to his death trying to rescue another surviving Sky person, and Finn Collins, who earlier in the season had shot a bunch of tree crew grounders and was going to be basically put to death by the tree crew, but then he was mercy killed by being stabbed by Clark. Then in the second half of season 2, 5 more delinquents are killed, because the Mountain Men used the blood and then later the bone marrow of the delinquents to survive on the surface. So when season 2 ends, of the original 102 delinquents, only 48 are still alive. Now, season 3 is a little bit confusing with the count for a lot of the groups, simply because we're not really given a specific number of people killed. My best guess is at least 2 more delinquents die over the course of season 3, only significant kill being Zoe Monroe, who is exposed to a poisonous gas when tree crew grounders burn down a village that the Sky People are wanting to move into on that land. So that means at most there are 46 delinquents still alive when season 4 begins. Now, the plot of season 4 is essentially a death wave called Prime Fire is coming and will kill everyone. And so at this point there are only 500 Sky People left based on a line we have at the beginning of season 4. So, like I said, best case there are just 46 delinquents, but it could be less than that left alive. And like I said, the plot is to figure out a way to survive. Ultimately, Jaha finds a bunker that can only save 1,200 people, and Octavia wins the conclave, which she decides to share the bunker with 100 people from every surviving clan. Now, ultimately, of the little over 450 remaining Sky People, only 105 are still alive when the season ends. The only significant kill of delinquents is in season 4 is Jasper Jordan, who commits suicide with several other delinquents because they didn't want to, I guess, they just want to go out on their own terms rather than just continue just to survive. They just wanted to end it already. But like I said, based on numbers that I could figure out, total number of Sky people that survived the end of Season 4 in either in the bunker, going back into space, or in Shallow Valley, only 105 total Sky people left, and at best, based on names from Clark's list, which Jaha and Kane used to decide who gets to survive in the bunker, there's at best 12 delinquents left. So of the original 102, when Season 4 ends, there's only 12 alive. And the end of Season 4 is significant because it's kind of a good midpoint to figure in for the show and helps kind of do some of the math for the numbers, which I'll get back more into that later. Then after the 6-year gap between Seasons 4 and 5, there are at best 8 delinquents left. Then, over the course of Season 5, the plot is one crew, which is everyone who survived in the bunker, space, and in Shallow Valley, coming together to fight off the elitist prisoners over the last bit of survival land left on the surface, which is the Shallow Valley. Now, ultimately, the fight results in the Shallow Valley being destroyed, and we know for a fact 412 total people survive of all of one crew and of the elitist prisoners. But then they all go into cryosleep for 125 years to get to another planet called Planet Alpha, which also is called Sanctum. But in that 125-year gap, Harvey McIntyre and Monty Green don't go into cryo, and instead they have a son, but then later they both die of old age. So when Season 6 starts, there are just 6 delinquents left. Then there is a thing where Clark is briefly killed, but then she's brought back. John Murphy is briefly killed and brought back, and I forgot to mention this earlier, Raven briefly died and was brought back in Season 4. But, like I said, at the beginning of Season 6, there are just 6 of the 102 delinquents left. And then, in Season 7, the only delinquent that is killed is Bellamy Blake, who, I guess, gets shot by Clark, who's trying to, I guess, protect her adopted daughter Maddie's life. And so then he's the only delinquent that gets killed in Season 7. So then when the human race transcends in the Season 7 finale, of the 5 delinquents left, because Clark killed someone during the test to determine whether or not the human race deserved to transcend, she didn't transcend. But the other 4 main delinquents, Tavia Blake, Raven Reyes, John Murphy, and Nathan Nate Miller, all transcended. But they chose to return to Earth so that way Clark wouldn't spend her life alone, since she was the only human being who was not allowed to transcend. So by the time the show ends, of the original 102 delinquents, there are only 5 still alive. The other 97 are all dead, and none transcended. So far we have a transcend count of just 0 and an alive count of 5. Now we'll move on to the rest of the Sky People. Okay, the second group is what I'm going to just call Sky People. Now, when the Apocalypse 1 happens, 97 years before Season 1, we are told that there are about 400 people in space when Apocalypse 1 occurs. Now, I already talked in my plot hole video about how the math doesn't make sense sometimes, particularly with the Sky People going from 400 to over 2,600 when Season 1 begins, so I'm not going to go into much detail on that. I just want to bring that up here. But we are told that of the original founders of the Ark, the original grounders, there were 400, and we are given information that says that when Season 1 begins, there are 2,659 Sky People. But like I said, I'm going to take the 102 delinquents out, so that gives us 2,557 Sky People when the show begins. Now, over the course of Season 1, at least 1,850 Sky People are killed. 320 are killed in the first half during the culling. Now, the only significant kills from the culling is Tor Limpkin, but a main character who was only in the pilot, Callie CC Cartwig, in my, I guess, headcanon, I consider someone who died in the culling. Just according to the 100 Wiki, she just died off screen according to a joke by Jason Rothenberg, because I guess her actress just didn't come back for the main show. But it makes more sense for her dying in the culling than this, but that's neither here nor there. Then, at least 1,530 Sky People are killed in Part 2. Now, in the second half of the season, the plot essentially is there's a coup to try and get some people to go to the ground because they know they don't have enough dropships to save everyone, but then it causes a power surge that results in much of the Ark shutting down, and then they don't have enough power to get everyone down to the ground. So people now, Commander Shumway was one of the members of the coup who was killed when he was the one who gave Bellamy Blake the gun to shoot Jaha, the pilot. He is killed by Diana Sidney and makes it look like a suicide. Diana Sidney builds a bomb to go off during the Unity Day celebration. One of the characters killed from that is Vera Kane. Then, when the dropship tries to go to the ground. Part of what goes wrong is Mount Weather was interfering with, I guess, the frequency at which the ship was piloting on. So Diana Sydney and all of her people are killed. And my headcanon was minor characters like Nigel and Reese Slimpkin, who were shown throughout the show, but they're never seen outside Season 1, either died as part of that rebellion or died during the Ark shutdown. So then, in the finale, Jaha decides, instead of sending just the dropships down, let's just send the whole Ark down to the ground. But, unfortunately, he has to stay behind on the Ark to do so, and at least a couple of stations are blown up or don't survive from crashing onto the ground. So, like I said, while we're not given an exact number, if my guess is at least 1,850 are killed over the course of Season 1, which means there are at best, or at most, 707 Sky People still alive when Season 2 starts. Then over the course of Season 2, the plot essentially is, at first, they're trying to find a way to survive by making peace with the Grounders to rescue their children from Mount Weather. Now, at least 35 Sky People are killed over the course of Season 2. We know for a fact 6 are killed in Part 1, but there aren't any significant kills, and at least 30 are killed in Part 2. Most are from when in Tondisi, a bomb or a missile sent by Mount Weather blows up the village. And at least 260 people are killed by either the missile or by the sniper the Mountain Men sent. And then, while that's going on, Jaha and a small group of his try to find the City of Light, and trying to avoid all the fighting and find a way to survive. Over the course of the second half of Season 2, the only significant kills are Major Byrne, who was a high-ranking guard officer who gets killed by a mutant gorilla. Denby, who was an Ark guard, in my headcanon, was one of the Ark guards that we see throughout Season 2, but then he's not there in the very last couple episodes. My headcanon was he was probably killed from that missile. And Craig, who was one of the people of Jaha's group that he has to sacrifice to a giant sea creature to save John Murphy's life, because he was one of the ones who went with Jaha to find the City of Light. So that means at most, when Season 2 ends, there are 672 Sky People still alive. Then, in the 3-month gap between Season 2 and Season 3, at least another 130 Sky People are killed. Most of which are from the farm station, which landed in Asgada Grounder territory, and many of them are killed there. But also my headcanon is some of the people that went with Jaha's group that just kind of disappeared. My headcanon, including a character named Caspian, they just got lost in the Dead Zone, Desert, or Nomadic Grounder territory. So that means when Season 3 starts, there are at most 542 Sky People left. Then, over the course of Season 3, we have at least another 70 Sky People that are killed. 56 killed in Season 1, most of which are killed off when Mount Weather's set to explode by an assassin sent by Asgada. Because after all the Mountain Men died in Season 2, some Sky People decided to move into Mount Weather, even though they made a deal with the Grounders they wouldn't. And characters that are killed from the assassin and the explosion include Gina Martin. But in my personal headcanon, characters that we saw in Season 2 that aren't here anymore, like Kyle Wick and Mel, I'm just counting them as characters that died in the explosion. Then, over the course of the second half of the season, with everything going on with Allie, with trying to find a new commander for the Grounders, and then everything going on with City of Light, and all the issues I talked about before, my big plot hole with the season, trying to do too much, too little time, that not everything's explained, and then also with Allie, the whole free will versus mind control thing. At least another 15 Sky People are killed in the second half of Season 3, including Sean Gilmer, who was a farm station survivor, Hannah Green, who was Monty Green's mother, Trapaco Sinclair, who gets killed by the last surviving Mountain Men, Lieutenant Carl Emerson, and then Charles Pike, who gets stabbed by Octavia in revenge for him killing Lincoln throughout the Season 3, and I'll get back more into that later with the Tree Crew Grounders. And so, going back to what I said with the delinquents, from the line we're given at the beginning of Season 4, there are 500 Sky People left of the original 2659. And as I said, if there are about, at best, 46 delinquents still alive, I'm going to say there are probably around 450 to 460 Sky People still alive, depending on how many delinquents there are. So then, over the course of Season 4, as I said earlier, plot is to find a way to survive. At first, the Sky People try to fix up what's left of Arcadia, which is a section of the Ark that survived, coming back to the ground. But then it gets burnt down by a grounder named Ilian. And ultimately, what happens is Octavia enters a conclave where one warrior from all the surviving grounder clans fight to determine who will get the bunker. Ultimately, Octavia wins the conclave, but she decides 100 people from each surviving clan will get the bunker. Now, if I was in Octavia's position, I would have saved all the Sky people, 100 members from Tree Crew and Asgada, and then 50 from the other 9 surviving clans, which would total a little over 1,100 people, since they could fit at most 1,200 in the bunker. And I get from story-wise why they had Octavia do what she did, but at the same time she was fighting for her clan, but then she doesn't save most of her clan. When really any other Sky person or delinquent that would have fought in the Conclave and won, they probably wouldn't have done that, but that's neither here nor there. Point is, by the end of Season 4, there are probably around 360 Sky people that are killed. The only significant kill is Brian, who was Nate's boyfriend, who was left outside the bunker to die with over 350 other Sky people when Prime Fire comes and kills them all. And as I said earlier, given the numbers we know for sure, 105 total Sky people survive at the end of Season 4. And so that means if there's 12 delinquents left, that means there's 93 Sky people left. And going back to what I said earlier with delinquents, from this point forward, at the end of Season 4 to the end of the show, for all the surviving clans in the bunker that later form one crew, I'm going to assume the numbers are basically proportionally about the same unless I'm told otherwise. So then when Season 5 begins, in the 6-year gap between 4 and 5, almost a third of the bunker dies, because there are about 820 members of one crew still alive in the bunker when the Season 5 begins. So that would mean if all numbers are about the same, 26 Sky people are killed. The only significant kill in that time frame is Thelonious Jaha, who, when the last of the Sky people in the bunker tried to take back the farm and starve all the other grounders to death, it fails, but Jaha gets stabbed, and he ultimately bleeds out. Then over the course, so then that means by the time Season 5 starts, we have around a little under 70 Sky people left, in addition to surviving 8 delinquents, which gives us about 75 total Sky people left alive. But then, when Season 5 ends, we know that there are 412 people that survive and on the Aegis ship. So again, assuming the numbers are about proportionate, I'm going to say that there are at best 31 Sky people left alive. The only significant kill in Season 5 is Kara Cooper, who was one of the people that tried to do the taking back the farm in the 6-year gap between 4 and 5, but ultimately failed, and then she gets killed by Bellamy and Clark. Then in the 125-year gap between Season 5 and Season 6, Harper and Monty have a son named Jordan Green. Now, I'm going to consider him a Sky person, not a delinquent, even though he's a child to delinquents. So when Season 6 starts, there are 32 Sky people left alive. Then what happens with Season 6, and this is going to come up with a couple of the other groups as well, we have characters that are killed off, but then find a way to come back to life, being revived. One of these characters is Marcus Kane, who got stabbed at the end of Season 5 by an Aegis prisoner, and in order to save his life, he becomes a Nightblood, which I'll get back to on that later, and then he gets brought back in the body of a Sanctumite, but then he commits suicide to prevent this from happening more with other Sanctumites. Then Dr. Abigail Abby Griffin, who was Clark's mom, gets killed by the leader of the Sanctumites so he can bring his wife back. And then at least from what I can tell, 5 more Sky people are killed by various Sanctumites on the Aegis ship in the finale of Season 6. So that means we have 8 deaths. Marcus Kane technically died twice, Abigail Griffin, and then 5 other Sky people that were on the Aegis ship. So when Season 7 starts, / the end of Season 6, there are 25 Sky people left. Then finally, over the course of Season 7, I'm going to say probably 3 more Sky people are killed. No more significant kills from what I can tell. We do have one that's killed in the first half of the season due to a radiation leak in Sanctum. And then the final episode, there's like a big shootout between what's left of one crew and a good chunk of the disciples. And at least a few dozen are killed on both sides, but it's hard to get an exact number of this. So I'm going to say, at best, when Season 7 ends, we have about 20 Sky people that transcend. The only significant names that we have are McCallan, who was a minor Sky person that I think appeared in Season 3, and he's not shown throughout the rest of the show, but the 100 Wiki says he did transcend. And then we have a few named Sky people, Graham Hill, Jim Stacy, and Julie Benson, who were just a couple of random names that were thrown out throughout the show that transcend. Then the only 2 Sky people that transcend but come back to life to be with Clark are Jordan Green and Dr. Eric Jackson. So that means so far of all the original Sky People, so 2,659, and then plus Jordan Green, so 2,660 people, only 7 are alive when the show ends, and like I said, about 20 transcend. So that's all the Sky People. Now I'm going to start talking about the Grounders. Okay, so now we are on to the Grounders. So one thing I need to bring up was originally there was plans to do one more season of the show, but ultimately it got scrapped. So similar with season 3, season 7 feels like it's 2 smaller seasons that combined into one. But I feel like it worked a little bit better than season 3, which is something I also talked about in my plot hole videos. And they also wanted to do a prequel series that never got picked up, which is part of the reason why it took me so long to do this video, because I was waiting to see what the word would be on the prequel show that never happened, and that's why I decided to start watching the show again. And then I came up with the idea of doing this video about the Transcending. So some of the stuff I'm talking about is more personal theories and headcanon than actual stuff confirmed in the show. And that also ties back to something I mentioned in one of the plot hole videos, that I once saw either a tweet or Facebook post that I've been unable to find again, that said when the show begins, there were between 10 and 15,000 grounders total on Earth when the show begins. Now, we don't know if all those are just grounders from the United States. We do know there were other surviving grounders in other countries. We did see a shot of grounders being killed in Egypt by the death wave. But I'm just going to say, when the show begins, from the 12 grounder clans, we have 12,500 grounders. And another thing I once saw was that Tree Crew and Asgada were the 2 biggest, and they were at war with each other. And the other 10 clans either had to pick a side or kind of be neutral in their fighting. So, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to say that there were 12,500 grounders when the show begins. 2,500 are from Tree Crew, 2,000 from Asgada, and 8,000 from the other 10 clans. But again, even though they're bigger combined, all of those individual clans are smaller than the other 2. And this ties back to one, and I'll bring up one more thing later when I talk about the Disciples, but in the 97 years, the Grounders are descendants of people who survived the apocalypse and found a way to adapt to surviving onto the surface. So I'm going to talk about Tree Crew first. So as I said, when Season 1 begins, my personal headcanon is that there's 2,500 Tree Crew. Then over the course of Season 1, the delinquents land in Tree Crew Grounder territory, and when they try to send the signal using the flares to let the Ark know they're alive, they accidentally burn down a Grounder village. Now we're not told how many Grounders were in that village, but I'm going to assume it's at least a few dozen or so. Then there are a few small fights here and there throughout the first season with the Tree Crew Grounders, and then finally in the final episode, at least 300 Tree Crew Grounders are killed by the delinquents, many of which are burned when they activate the thrusters and the rockets of the dropship to burn them in order to save as many of the delinquents inside the dropship as they can. The only significant kill I could find from Tree Crew in Season 1 was Caliban, who was a minor Tree Crew Grounder that Clark stabbed when she got captured by the Tree Crew Grounders trying to save another Tree Crew Grounder's life. So that means there are probably about 400 Tree Crew Grounders killed in Season 1. So that means when Season 2 starts, there's probably at best around 2,100. Then over the course of Season 2, at least 60 Tree Crew are killed. There are about 35 killed in Part 1. Tristan is shot by Marcus Kane in the first episode, and then a few episodes later, Anya, who was a grounder that was taken by the Mountain Men in addition to delinquents. And as we see, the Mountain Men use the grounders for their blood to help them adapt to radiation. She gets shot when she helps Clark return to Arcadia, but then ultimately she dies after being shot. Then in the second half of Season 2, at least another 25 Tree Crew are killed. Gustus, who was a bodyguard to the commander Lexo, was killed when he tried to stage, making it look like the Sky People were trying to kill her. So he faced the death by 1,000 cuts that originally Finn would have had to deal with. Quint is a Tree Crew Grounder whose brother was killed by the delinquents in the Season 1 finale, and he gets killed by the mutant gorilla. And then a minor Tree Crew Grounder in my headcanon named Rivo, who appeared a couple times throughout Season 2, but then he's not really there in the second half. My headcanon is he gets killed by the Mount Weather missile that blows up Tondisi partway into the second half of Season 2. So at the end of Season 2, after Commander Alexa makes a deal with the Mountain Men to save all of her people out of Mount Weather but leave the delinquents behind, I'm going to say that there are at most a little over 2,000 Tree Crew Grounders still alive. Now, again, going back to something I said earlier, with Season 3, it's hard to really figure out the math with the numbers, because at least with the Sky People, we know that there are 500 still alive when 3 ends/Season 4 begins. We're not really given a specific number really for any of the Grounders. My personal canon is when Season 3 ends / Season 4 begins, the grounder population's been cut in half, so there's probably at best around 6,000 or so grounders left. So I would say there's probably about 1,000 Tree Crew, about 1,000 Asgata, and then about 4,000 or so other grounders still alive at the end of Season 3 / beginning of Season 4. So that means over the course of Season 3, we have about 1,000 Tree Crew deaths, which isn't unrealistic considering at one point about 300 Tree Crew are killed after a whole issue, which I talked about before in one of my plot hole videos about Bellamy, Charles Pike, and several Sky people killing the Tree Crew grounders that were essentially doing a blockade of Arcadia to protect them, but ultimately they killed them anyway. And then significant kills mostly come from the second half of the season. Simmet was one of the people Tree Crew people whose family was killed by Bellamy and Charles Pike. He gets killed by Lexa. Lexa gets shot by Titus, who was the Flamekeeper. He was trying to kill Clark, but he ends up shooting Lexa, which results in her death. And that leads the whole thing in the second half of the season with trying to find a new commander of the Grounders. Lincoln is killed when he's taken captive by Charles Pike after he tries to help Octavia and her group leave Arcadia. And then, like I said, he gets shot, and then later, revenge, Octavia kills Pike for shooting Lincoln. And even though we never know for sure which clan he's from, my headcanon Titus is Tree Crew, so he ends up committing suicide by slitting his own throat, so that way he can't make an Asgata, a girl named Antari, become the next commander. But then, like I said, at best, by the time Season 4 ends, we have about 1,000 Tree Crew left. Then over the course of Season 4, the whole plot is to find a way to survive. And the only significant Tree Crew character that's killed is Nico, who was Lincoln's best friend that was kind of there throughout Seasons 2 and 3. But ultimately, he dies by being shot by one of Allie's AI drones in Season 4. So when Season 4 ends, there are 101 Tree Crew that survive. So that means about 899 at least, or about 900 Tree Crew die over the course of Season 4. And the reason why it's 101, because even though 100 Tree Crew are given spots in the bunker, Octavia saves Nyla's life by letting her take a spot of one of the Sky people. Which, again, goes back to the whole thing of, if any other Sky person had won, they probably would have saved all their people and maybe a handful of Tree Crew or Asgata, but they definitely would not have saved as many as they did of the Grounders. But that means there are 101 Tree Crew of the original 2,500 when Season 4 ends. Then, keeping all things proportional again, that means there are probably about 70 Tree Crew Grounders still alive at the beginning of Season 5, so at least 30 deaths over the course of the 6-year gap between 4 and 5. Then, over the course of Season 5, when the show, after the fighting with the Allegiance prisoners over the Shadow of Clan Valley, there are best about 30 or so Tree Crew left, which means about 35 to 40 more Tree Crew are killed. So, again, all things proportional, there are probably around 31 or 32 Tree Crew left when Season 5 ends. Now, over the course of Season 6, most of the Grounders, including Tree Crew, remain in cryosleep until the finale. The only 3 that are woken up are Indra, Nyla, and Gaia. And no Tree Crew, what I can tell, are killed in Season 6. And at best, only a handful are killed in Season 7 in the final fight between with one crew versus the Disciples. So, I'm going to say at best, by the time Season 7 ends, around 25 Tree Crew transcend. Lindo, the Defector, and Penn, who were a couple Tree Crew we saw throughout Seasons 2, 5, and 7, transcend, and then only 3 transcend but then come back to be on Earth with Clark. Indra and Gaia, who are a mother-daughter Tree Crew that we saw throughout the course of the show, and then Nyla, who, as I mentioned, was at one point kind of a fling with Clark and a close ally amongst the Tree Crew to Clark, and was a big help for her in the final season as well. So, like I said, that means we have at this point around 45 to 50 people who have transcended, the 20 or so Sky people, and then about 25 Tree Crew. So now I'll move on to the Asgata Grounders. Alright, so the 4th group is Asgata. So as I said a minute ago, when the show begins, given my own personal headcanon information I can find, Tree Crew and Asgata have been fighting for quite a while by the time the show begins. And since they're the two largest clans, I'm going to say Tree Crew, if they had about 2,500, Asgeda had about 2,000. Now, we don't really see any Asgeda die in Season 1, or even in the first half of Season 2. And in fact, most of what I can tell from Asgeda probably died from the Mount Weather missile blowing up Tondisi. And if there were around 250, 260 people killed, assuming all the numbers are about proportionate, that would mean probably around 20 or so Asgeda are killed. So that means when Season 2 ends, there's still roughly around 2,000 total Asgeda still alive. But in the 3-month gap between Season 2 and Season 3, many Sky people are killed fighting Asgeda from Farm Station, which landed in Asgeda territory. So if about 130 Sky people were killed in that 3-month gap, I'm going to say probably around the same number of Asgeda are killed. So we probably have around 1,800 or so Asgeda left over the course of Season 3. Then with all the fighting going on between Grounders and Sky people, and then everything going on with Allie, I'm going to say again, similar to the Tree Crew, there are probably at best around 1,000 Asgeda left by the end of Season 3. Or, yeah, the end of Season 3. So that means around another 800 or so Asgeda die over the course of that season. Significant kills including Queen Naya, who is, during a duel between Lexa and King and Ronan, she ends up throwing a spear, which kills Nyla and makes Ronan the king of the Asgeda. Then Antari, who was Nightblood initiate, who's going to be competing in the Conclave to become the next commander, she kills the other Nightbloods in their sleep. But then everything going on with Allie, even though she does technically become commander briefly, ultimately Allie's the one who's controlling her. And then near the end of the season, Jaha and Abby essentially try to kill Antari, so that way Clark can't stop Allie. And then she's essentially brain dead, but then they have to pump her heart in order to keep Nightblood flowing through Clark's body through a complicated series of events I don't want to get into here. But then once they defeat Allie, essentially Antari's dead because she's brain dead, and then they're no longer beating her heart. So when Season 4 starts, there are about 1,000 Asgeda left, and then over the course of Season 4, a lot of Tree Crew and Asgeda are killed fighting each other. Then, ultimately, when the season ends, near the end of the season with the Conclave, King Ronan was took part in the Conclave, but then he's killed by Luna in the end of the fight because he can't survive in the acid rain, so he's weakened, and then Luna kills him by essentially drowning him in a big fountain during the Conclave. But 100 Asgeda are ultimately given spots in the bunker. But one Asgeda, Echo, who we met at the beginning during Season 2, is one of the Grounders that was in Mount Weather, and then also tricked Bellamy into helping blow up Mount Weather. She goes into space as one of the small crew that survive outside of the bunker. And then that means when the season ends, similar with the Asgeda, with the Tree Crew, there are 101 Asgeda, 100 in the bunker, and then 1 in space. Then, once again, over the 6-year gap, probably around 30 or so deaths, which means there are around maybe 70 or so when Season 5 starts. Over the course of the season, the fighting with the Allegiance prisoners results in the 412 total people still alive, which probably is around 30 or so Asgeda left. Once again, when Season 6 happens, from what I can tell, the only Asgeda that was awake was Echo, who goes down with a bunch of the Adventure Squad, which is a term I'm surprised I haven't used until this point, but that's something I'd said a few times in my Plotto videos, go down onto Sanctum. Now, we do get a little bit more about Echo's backstory, but more of it comes into later Season 7. But again, as far as I can tell, no Asgeda are killed over the course of Season 6, though Echo does become a Nightblood in Season 6. Then in Season 7, from what I can tell, again, no more Asgeda are killed until the finale, when a few are killed fighting the Disciples. Although Echo does get shot, and ultimately she's kept her heart pumping by Octavia in order to keep her alive. So then when the finale happens and Transcendence occurs, there are probably between 25 and 30 Asgeda that transcend, and then Echo/Ash, because we find out that's actually her real name. She took her best friend's identity before the events of the show began, and Echo's the only one of her people that comes back to Earth whereas, like I said, the rest transcend. So that means by the time Season 7 ends, we have about 25 to 30 Asgata that transcend, which means at this point we have a little over 70 total people that have transcended. So we've gotten the two biggest Grounder clans taken care of. Now I'm going to move on to the last group, which is all the other Grounder clans. Okay, so most of the remaining 10 Grounder clans don't really get that many, I guess, characters that are significant over the course of the show. We do get a handful of, like, okay, there's like this Grounder from this clan, or like this is where this clan is, kind of a thing. But for the purpose of this video, because I didn't want to go through all the Grounder clans individually, because I didn't want this video to be that long, and like I said, some of it's more headcanon than anything else, I'm going to combine all the other 10 Grounder clans and collectively as one group I'm just calling Other Grounders, which means they're not Tree Crew and they're not Asgata. But, as I said, going based on that one tweet or Facebook post I could find, I'm going to say when Season 1 begins, there are probably around 8,000 Grounders from the 10 clans, which means at best maybe the next largest clan is 1,000 or so. But there are some clans that are smaller, so it kind of averages out to around 800 a clan. Now, over the course of Season 1, from what we can tell, the Delinquents only fought Tree Crew, so that means no Asgata and no other Grounders died. Then over the course of Season 2, as far as we can tell, no Grounders are killed in the first half, and the only major Grounders that are killed is in the second half, when Mount Weather fires the missile on Tondisi. If about 250, 260 people are killed, assuming it's all about the same, that's about 20 Grounders from every clan and then 20 Sky people killed, so it gives us about maybe 200 or so other Grounders that are killed. Then the last couple of episodes, when all the Grounders are attacking Mount Weather, we do see a handful here and there that are killed. Now, we don't get an exact number, but at least, I'd say at least another dozen are killed in the second to last episode of the season. So when Season 1 ends, or Season 2 ends, I'm going to say there are probably around 220 or so Grounders killed. So that means we have maybe around 7,800 Grounders still alive when the season ends. And the only significant kill from Season 2 is Karis, who was another Grounder initiated trainee, kind of like what Octavia was to Indra in Season 2. Then in Season, and from what I can tell, we don't really know of any Grounders that are killed in the 3-month gap between the two seasons. But then over Season 3, again, assuming the Grounders' population's cut in half, I'm going to say at least another 3,500 Grounders are killed over the course of Season 3. There are a lot of minor characters that are killed all throughout, but the only significant Grounder kills are Otan, who was Amori's brother, who had helped, the two of them would bring Tech to Allie to help her, I guess, find a way to survive outside the bunker, or outside of her mansion, and he took the chip, but then whenever he comes back to Arcadia with Jaha, he gets shot and dies. And then, over the course, like I said, of the season, we see a lot of other Grounders that get tortured, to be forced to take the chip, and then they join the City of Light and are under Allie's control, which again goes back to that plot hole about free will versus control kind of a thing. But the only other two significant Grounder clans are from Luna's clan, the Shay and Derek, who are killed basically when several of her clan have taken the chips, come back to their oil rig area where they live, and are killed fighting to try and prevent Luna from being killed, because she is a Nightblood that could help stop Allie. So I'm going to say by the end of Season 3 / beginning of Season 4, we got maybe around 4,000 other Grounders still alive. Then, over the course of the season, we do see several other Grounders killed in Season 4, but most of them don't die until the very end. The only significant kills before the Conclave episode is the Rockline Thief, who Imori calls Bayless, when they test the Nightblood and radiation exposure on him, but ultimately it fails and he dies from that. And then a handful, and then we have one Grounder from every clan that's killed in the Conclave. Ilian, who was kind of a confidant, ally, rebound, whatever you want to call him, to Octavia, gets killed in the Conclave when he's shot by an arrow by Echo, which is something I forgot to mention earlier with the Asgata. And then Luna, who originally ran away from her first Conclave to become the commander of the Grounders, she gets killed, literally stabbed in the back by Octavia. And then so the only other characters I can assume probably die from other Grounders are Sienna and Zoran, who were also searching for the City of Light but we never actually see them at all in Season 3, so presumably they just died off screen from the Death Wave. And so by the time Season 4 ends, we have 902 other Grounders still alive. 100 from each of the remaining 9 clans, because Luna's clan is completely wiped out from the radiation from the Death Wave coming. So we have 9 of the 10 surviving clans, and 100 from each one. The other 2 are Imori, who goes into space with the rest of the space crew, and then Maddie, who was a Nightblood that was too young to take part in the Conclave, and her parents hid her from the I forgot the name. The Flamekeeper is I think is what they were called. So she survives in the Shallow Valley and then is essentially adopted by Clark, since they're the only 2 left on Earth, as far as they can tell, that survived, because they were the only 2 Nightbloods left. So this goes back to something else I probably said in one of my plot videos, I can't remember, how it is possible there may have been other child Nightbloods, but because they didn't have anyone to take care of them, and there's no survival of land, they probably died before Clark got out of the lighthouse bunker at the end of in the gap between seasons 4 and 5. So, of the original 8,000 or so other Grounders, we only have 902 still alive when Season 4 ends. Which also gives us a total of 1,209 people that are alive at the end of Season 4. 1,200 in the bunker, 7 in space, 2 in the Shallow Valley clan. Then, going back to the whole idea of the numbers being proportionate, probably around 280 to 290 are killed in the 6-year gap between 4 and 5. Which means when Season 5 starts, we have probably around 610, 620 other Grounders still alive from the other 9 clans. Then, by the end of Season 5, most of the other Grounders are killed off. I'm going to say probably around another 330 to 350, because again, the number's probably about the same, but we could be off there. So, if the proportionate when we get to the ship, they're probably around 275 other Grounders still alive on the ship. Then, in the 125-year gap between Seasons 5 and 6, pretty much all the other Grounders are in cryosleep. From what I can tell, the only one that wakes up in Season 6 is Imori. Everyone else stays in cryo. And Maddie, who is also woken up at the beginning of Season 6. And from what I can tell, no Grounders are killed. Other Grounders are killed in Season 6. But in the final episode, when Shade Hada, who was a former commander that is, I guess, awakened inside the AI, the chip, or the flame as they call it, inside Maddie's head, when she's made the commander in Season 4, the end of Season 5, he basically takes over Maddie's body. And one thing he does is he awakens all of one crew. But ultimately, Raven uses a kill switch to destroy the flame, but Shade Hada / Malachi, which is his real name, actually finds a way to escape the flame and find another mind drive chip to escape to, which I'll get back to in a second. So, ultimately, when Season 7 ends, we still have, or Season 6 and / Season 7 begins, we still have around 270, 275 other Grounders still alive. But then in the first episode of Season 7, it's revealed that Shade Hada transferred his consciousness from the flame to Russell Prime's mind drive, who was the leader of the Sanctomites. And he kills Russell in the mind space so he can take over Russell's body. So, again, kind of the whole idea about doing the math a little confusing with the whole death and revival kind of thing. I'm going to consider him a revival, so we just add one more to that, around 270, 275 other Grounders. Then over the course of Season 7, around 3 dozen Grounders are killed. At least a handful are killed throughout the second half of the season, but from what I can tell, since we don't know for sure if any of them are true crew as Geta, I'm just counting them as other Grounders. And then whenever we have the big fight between the one crew and Disciples, assuming, again, proportionate, probably a few dozen one crew are killed fighting the Disciples in the finale. And then Shade Hada / Malachi gets the honor of being the last kill of the series, since after a duel earlier in the season between him and Indra, where she basically says, "Spare Maddie's life and I'll kneel," she gets her final revenge on him by saying, "For my mother," because before the events of the show, Shade Hada had been the one who, I guess, conquered all the Grounder clans, tried to unite them as one, but then he killed Indra's mother. Well, here she gets the revenge by getting the final blow by killing him using one of the Aegis prisoners' weapons. So when Season 7 ends with all all the surviving human race transcending, there are probably around 230, 235 other grounders still alive. So, the only significant ones that transcend are Maddie Griffin. The only other one I could find that I don't know which clan they're from was the Anthem Singer / Singing Grounder, because she kind of was called both. And then Imori also transcends after she actually died from injuries in the second to last episode of the season. She got was in like an explosion and some rebar stabbed in her chest. She dies from the injuries in the final episode, but because her mind drive was put inside John Murphy's head, she's able to be revived as part of Final Crew. So, I'm going to say at this point, taking all the people from Earth that we've encountered so far, all the Sky people and all the Grounders, we have probably just over 300 people who've transcended. Now, we've gotten all the Grounders done. We're going to move on to the next group, the Mountain Men. Okay, so the Mountain Men are pretty unique in that they're probably the easiest one to figure out the numbers for of any group that I'm going to talk about. So in the pilot, Jaha says Mount Weather was the most likely place to survive when the nuclear apocalypse 1 happened. And he says it is likely that 200 people could have survived there for a certain amount of time. I forgot how many years he said. So I'm just going to say that when the show begins with Apocalypse 1, there are probably at least 200 people in Mount Weather, including the President of the United States at the time, President Wallace. But then after 97 years, given the line we have partway into Season 2, there are about 384 mountain men alive in Mount Weather when Season 1 happens. And from what I can tell, none of them are killed over the course of Season 1. In the Season 1 finale, most of the surviving delinquents are taken to Mount Weather, and the whole idea with President Dante Wallace is to find a way to integrate them into the Mount Weather for them to eventually find a way to survive on the surface. Because after generations being stuck in the mountain men want to get on the surface as well because they couldn't adapt to the radiation. Now, real quick, going back to something I said earlier, with my personal headcanon thing, taking into account that we never got the prequel series, my personal headcanon would be the original Grounders who got out of the Second Dawn bunker 97 years ago with the Nightblood, probably tried going to different bunkers and underground communities and gave them some of the Nightblood to survive on the surface. But the Mountain Men either was never discovered, or by the time they were discovered, they had run out of the Nightblood. Hence why they never got it and were stuck in Mountain Weather. Because it always kind of bothered me, how is it, especially after watching Season 7, how is it the Mountain Men never got the chance to survive on the surface with all the other Grounder clans later? So my guess is, like I said, they just ran out of Nightblood, or they just never actually bothered to take it because of some events that happened about 50 years before the events of the show when Dante was a kid. Whenever a bunch of people died, whenever they opened the doors to Mount Weather, radiation killed a lot of them. So over the course of Season 2, of the 384 Mountain Men, 383 are killed. 2 in the first half of the season, and then 381 in Part 2. Significant kills from Part 2 of Season 2 are Sergeant Eric Lovejoy, who's killed by Bellamy Blake when he tries to go undercover inside Mount Weather. Dr. Lorelei Singh, who is killed whenever Bellamy lets a little bit of radiation to Mount Weather. She's killed by the radiation as well. Vincent V., who was one of the Mountain Men who was sympathetic to helping the delinquents, ends up getting killed. President Dante Wallace gets shot by Clark whenever she tries to make a bargain with his son after he usurps his father. And ultimately, whenever the deal doesn't work, Clark shoots Dante. Maya V., who was Jasper's love interest in Season 2, and one who really tried to help the delinquents, she's one of the 350 or so Mountain Men who were killed from the radiation leak by Clark, Bellamy, and Monty in the Season 2 finale. And then Cage Wallace, who was one of the few Mountain Men still alive in the end of Season 2, who got bone marrow because he was more powerful than the blood, he gets killed by Lincoln, for revenge being turned into a Reaper, which is something I failed to talk about back with the Tree Crew. How that's what Mountain Men would do, was turn some of the Tree Crew Grounders into Reapers to help protect them. So when Season 1 ends, Season 2 ends, there's only one Mountain Man still alive, Lieutenant Carl Emerson. And ultimately, when Season 3 happens, he's at first the one who gets captured by Asgeda, who tells them how to blow up Mount Weather, kind of for revenge against the Sky People for killing his people, and to help the Asgeda. He's the one who tells them how to blow it up, and ultimately, he's still a captive taken to Lexa and Clark in the capital city, Grounder City Polis, which is something I've also kind of been skipping around about. Didn't feel like it was too significant, really. in Season 3, but Clark decides to spare his life. But then later on in the second half of the season, he comes back. He's the one who ends up attacking Arcadia, killing what's left of the Sky People that aren't chipped by Allie under her control. And he's the one who kills Jacopo Sinclair, or Jacopo Sinclair, how do you say his name? But then later, Clark kills him by putting the flame in his neck, because the flame can only work with Nightblood or Commander. So because Lieutenant Carl Anderson doesn't have it, the flame basically just destroys his brain. So when Season 3 ends, all the Mountain Men have been wiped out. And since the dead can't transcend, as we were told a couple times in Season 7, every Mountain Man has died, and none transcend. So it makes it kind of easy to do the math on that one. So now we'll go on to the next group, the Aegis Prisoners. Okay, so now we're on to the Aegis Prisoners. So one of the things that's brought up in Seasons 4 and 5 was the Aegis Corporation had a few ships that went across the universe exploring planets, and one of them was a mining operation that would take prisoners to get fuel. I think it was hydrazine, lithium. I forgot the actual name for it, or something like that. And from what we were told, based on a line in Season 5, there were 337 people on the Aegis ship that had the prisoners on it. 300 prisoners, 37 guards and crew. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this was before Apocalypse 1 happened or just after Apocalypse 1 happened, but the prisoner staged, again, kind of a coup and ended up killing every guard and prisoner on the ship except for Lieutenant Miles Ezekiel Shaw. But because they damaged one of the engines of the ship, it would take them about a century to get back to Earth. So by the time Season 5 happens, there are 300 prisoners and Miles Shaw, who I'm just going to count, make it easier, as Aegis prisoners. So 301 of the 337 actually come back at the beginning of Season 5. Now, it is difficult to do an exact math, but from what I can tell, based on a line we have in Season 7, of the 301 Aegis prisoners, 263 are killed over the course of Season 5. 10 are killed in Part 1. And then 253 are killed in Part 2. There is a big fight between two different factions of the Aegis prisoners that are either loyal to Paxton, Graveyard, McCreary, and Charmaine Dioza. And then many of them are killed through infighting with that, and then a lot of them are killed in the final episode of Season 5 when one crew storms to the valley, killing a bunch of the Aegis prisoners. But given, like I said, a line dialogue we have in Season 7, and going back to what I said earlier with how there's 412 people on the Aegis ship when the show begins, that means there are 38 of the original 301 Aegis prisoners when Season 5 begins that are actually still alive when Season 5 ends. And the only two significant kills are Michael Vincent, who was the one who stabbed Kane at the end of Season 5, because he kind of had developed feelings for Abby, and he wanted her to get back, kind of depending on him for meds. And then Paxton Graveyard McCreary, I was trouble saying his name, is killed by Clark after McCreary drops the bomb from the Aegis ship in orbit onto the valley to destroy it, because as he says, if I can't have this valley, no one else can. And something I kind of left out with the whole plot of Season 5, like I said, they're in fighting between McCreary and Dioza. But as it turns out, McCreary got Dioza pregnant before the Apocalypse 1, and they get cryo for 100 years or so. So Dioza is currently pregnant with his kid. But like I said, so when Season 5 ends, there are 38 Aegis prisoners still alive. Then, when Season 6 happens, most of them are kept in cryo along with all of one crew. The only Aegis prisoner that's killed during the course of Season 6 is Miles Ezekiel Shaw, who dies from radiation exposure to when they go on Planet Alpha by the radiation shield that the Sanctimites use to protect them from some of the animal life that's on the planet. Then, while this happens off-screen in Season 6, but we do see it in the flashback in Season 7, Charmaine Dioza has her child, a daughter she names Hope Dioza, during the course of Season 6. But part of the thing that's going to be confusing, is especially when we talk about the Sanctimites and Disciples, is the whole issue of the 5 different planets that we see in Season 6 and 7, all on different time scales. Because while they're on Sanctum, it's only a few seconds, but on the planet that she has her kid on, I forgot the name, I think it was Planet Beta, Skyring was the other name for it. decades go by there. So Hope ends up becoming a grown adult by the time season 6 ends. So ultimately in season 6, we have one death, but then one birth. So ultimately the number is still 38 Allegiance prisoners total, because similar with the whole thing with Jordan Green, I'm going to count Hope as an Allegiance prisoner because she's the daughter of Allegiance prisoners. Then over the course of season 7, I'm going to say there are probably around 8 or 9 Allegiance prisoners that are killed. We have 4 in part 1. Patch, who was basically the one who's now in charge of the Allegiance prisoners after Query is dead and Dioza was banished from Sanctum. But he and a small group are killed during the whole trying to fix the radiation leak inside Sanctum when Raven had him go in, and ultimately that kind of affects Raven, something I left out earlier when talking about her in the delinquent section. And then at least a few more killed, either individually or in the final episode in the fight with the Disciples. The only significant kill is Charmaine Dioza. Hope and Echo wanted to try to destroy or kill off all the Disciples using something called Gem 9, which we'll get back to later, which is a chemical used to kill a species when they fail to transcend. And ultimately, Charmaine Dioza sacrifices herself in order to save the lives of her daughter and other people on all the other remaining disciples on Bardo, so she gets crystallized into Gem 9. So then when the season ends, from what I can tell, there are probably just around 25 to 30 more of the original 301 Allegiance prisoners that transcend. The only significant kill is Nikki, who was Hatch's wife, who had a bit of a hatred towards Raven for getting him killed, but only comes to her aid in the final episode. And then 2 other Allegiance prisoners who were named Great and Hugo. And then Hope transcends as well, but then ultimately she comes back with the rest of the final crew. So when season 7 ends, of all the Allegiance prisoners, like I said, probably a little under 30 transcend, and Hope comes back to Earth. So at this point, we're probably at around 330 to 340 people who have transcended. And now we're going to move on to the next big group, which is the Sanctumites. Okay, so the next group we're on to now is the Sanctumites, which is probably going to be the hardest group for me to do numbers for. It's almost all of my reasoning is going to be headcanon because I can never really find a specific set number to go with. Now, as I said in one of my plot hole videos, one of the Allegiance ships carried a bunch of scientists from Earth to explore 5 different planets, one of which was Planet Alpha, which was later named Sanctum. Now, we know for a fact there were 13 Sanctumites, people on Allegiance 4 that were Mission Team Alpha that land on Planet Alpha, which is later named Sanctum. Now, during one of the first Red Suns, Russell Lightborn kills about half of the members of Team Alpha. And then later on, they find a way to use the embryos once they grow up, put their mind drives in the newly born people to become primes. That's how they're able to live for hundreds of years, because every time one of them dies, they just put their mind drive in another body, wipe that person's mind, and they take over the body. Which, again, the whole issue of revival is going to affect the numbers, which I'll get to later. Now, the other thing was that I mentioned, I think on the plot hole videos, but I didn't really go into too much detail for because Season 7, I was hoping to address it. They kind of did, but they also didn't give us a definite answer, was what happened to the crews of the other 4 planets? The only one we know for sure was on Planet Beta / Skyring. Something went wrong, and only one other person survived on that planet. My personal headcanon is, when they got to Skyring, which was Planet Beta, something probably happened to that Allegiance ship, which probably damaged it, or caused it to explode in the atmosphere, because it looked like Skyring obviously had like an asteroid belt around it. So my guess is that ship was destroyed, and everyone who was on that ship died. And then the only survivor who landed on Planet Beta, forgot his name, he just died on his own later on. And so that means the only members of that Allegiance ship that survived on Planet Alpha for hundreds of years as the primes. And then, like I said, they used the Nightblood to just have as many children as they could. But then one of the primes, Gabriel Santiago, was tired of constantly having to keep bringing his people coming back by killing their people, the Sanctumites. So he burned the embryos, and then that's when they started doing ablation. But ultimately, by the time Season 6 happens, there aren't that many hosts left for the primes, and a few primes have actually not come back for a while. So with all that said, my question is then, the question is how many Sanctomites are actually on planet Alpha when people from Earth come on their Allegiance ship? Well, I'm going to say if there's 411 people on the Allegiance prisoner ship, then there's about 411 total people on planet Alpha. And then the question is, how many are Sanctomites, how many are Children of Gabriel? And I'll go into more detail this with the Children of Gabriel. But I'm going to say by the time Season 6 starts, there are about 373 Sanctomites. And then 38 Children of Gabriel, which gives us a total of 411. So, as for the 373 Sanctomites, over the course of Season 6, we have 6 Sanctomites that are the Primes that are revived by either killing some of their own people or killing Dr. Abby Griffin, to bring back their own. In the first half of the season, Priya Desai and Josephine Ada Lightborn are brought back. Josephine is brought back inside Clark. And then in the second half of the season, 4 more Primes are brought back. Dr. Miranda Mason, Jasmine Mason, Kayla Mason, and Dr. Simone Lightborn. But then the question is then how many people are killed, of the Sanctomites are killed in Season 6? Well, it's not exact math, but I'm going to say probably around 60 to 70, at least 65 Sanctomites are killed. 7 in Part 1, the only significant kills being Delilah Janice Workman, who was a host that was her mind was wiped, so that Priya Desai could be brought back. And then Kaylee Lee, who was one of the Primes, whose family was killed when they tried to escape onto the Legion's ship at the beginning of the season, but later she was stabbed by Simone inside Clark's body, because Kaylee had killed Josephine's previous body. Then I'm going to say about another 60 are killed in the second half. Significant kills include Gavin, who was a Sanctomite, who was killed so that Marcus Kane could be brought back. Josephine is killed for good in the Mind Space by Clark. Riker Desai gets stabbed by Echo. Jade was a Sanctomite guard who was killed, so that way, I think it was either Miranda or Jasmine, I forgot which one it was. She came back in Jade's body. Priya Desai, who was brought back inside Delilah's body, gets stabbed by Delilah's parents. And then Jasmine Mason, and then Kayla Mason, and Miranda Mason are all floated by Clark in the finale. And then Dr. Simone Lightborn, who was brought back inside Dr. Abigail Griffin's body, is also floated. And then Russell sees his family get floated in the final episode on the Allegiance ship. But also what happened was, in the episode before the finale, Russell used the Red Sun toxin to drive a bunch of his people mad, and at least a few dozen are killed when they're fighting each other, and some of them are also, I guess, who were not declared faithful are also killed as well. And then we see a bunch of Sanctomite guards killed, but from what I can tell, none of them are significant other than the ones I mentioned that were mind-wiped. So by the time Season 6 ends / Season 7 begins, I'm going to say they're probably at most around 315 Sanctomites still alive. And then over the course of Season 7, at least another 40 Sanctomites are killed. And as I said when I was talking about the other Grounders, when Shade Hada escaped the flame, he went into Russell Prime's mind drive, and he kills Russell Lightborn in his mind space. And then a handful of others are killed over the course of Season 7. But then there's one episode when I guess it's made clear to everyone that Shade Hada is in Russell's body. He stabs about 30 or so Sanctomites, and then a few bleed out over the next couple episodes from their injuries. So we do add about 30 dozen more deaths there. But then by the time Season 7 ends, because again, we're not given an exact number, as far as I can tell, every single surviving Sanctomite at this point transcends. None of them come back in the finale to join Final Crew, which to be fair makes sense. They never really lived on Earth, and they didn't really know Clark and her group for that long, so it wouldn't really make sense for any of them to want to come back and avoid transcendence. Now, there are no real significant characters that are transcended of the Sanctomites that are left. We have a few minor characters and named characters, like background characters that transcend. Lith Ann Workman and Jay Workman, who, like I said, were Delilah's parents. A couple of minor characters as well. Jeremiah, Jonathan, Lee, Little Believer Boy, Linda, Paula, Rex, Rex's younger brother, the Sanctomite Apprentice, Sanctomite Farmer, and Trey. Who, like I said, were just a bunch of minor characters that really mostly just in the background. But from what I can tell, these are all the characters that were confirmed of Sanctomites to be transcended. So if we add in, like I said, about 275 to that, that gives us, at this point, about a little over 600, maybe about 610 people that transcended at this point. So now we only have 2 groups left. Next one we talk about is Children of Gabriel. Okay, so going back to what I said earlier, when the original 13 Sanctomites got on planet Alpha, they had used the embryos to help bring themselves back for centuries. But Dr. Gabriel Santiago got tired of the immortality and constantly killing their own people just to keep themselves alive. So he destroys the embryos and flees. But then later on he dies after forming a cult of people that are tired and they know the truth about the primes, who are just people that killed their own people to constantly keep being brought back. But then ironically, after his last body dies, before the events of Season 6 happen, Gabriel's brought back and put in the mind of a host body that's one of the children of Gabriel. So the guy was named Xavier, but after he was brought back, he took over Xavier's identity. Now, going back to what I said earlier, if there are about 411 people on the Allegiant ship, I'm going to say there are about 411 people on Sanctum. But then how many are children of Gabriel? Well, I'm going to say if there were 38 Legion's prisoners, I'm going to say there's 38 children of Gabriel. So about the same number from both. And over the course of Season 6, from what I can tell, 17 children of Gabriel are killed over the course of Season 6. 13 in Part 1, one of which is Killian, who was a doctor on Sanctum, but he was actually working undercover to help the children of Gabriel save the hosts. So even though they were kind of like the terrorist group, it was kind of like an ends justify the means kind of thing, or doing bad things for a good cause. But ultimately he kills himself, so that way he can't be taken captive by the primes and interrogated to find the truth. Then there are a handful more in Part 2 that are killed. One of which is who was close to Xavier, is killed during the whole fighting, and then of the faithful versus the non-faithful from the adjustment protocol. So of the original 38 children of Gabriel, I'm going to say when Season 6 ends, Season 7 begins, there are probably around 21 left, so a little over half. Then over the course of Season 7, 20 more children of Gabriel are killed. At least 18 are killed by... about 18 of which are killed, because I had to do my best to count the number of children of Gabriel he kills, Shade kills, near the end of the season. The only significant one that he kills is Nelson/Sachin, who was kind of like a close friend to Xavier, but then, like I said, Dr. Santiago came back in his body and took over Xavier's identity. And he was refused to kneel to Shade Hada, which is another thing I've kind of been skipping out. So he and all of the remaining children of Gabriel are killed. Then, near the end of the season, Dr. Gabriel Santiago is killed by Shade Hada after everything that went on in that season of him discovering the truth about the anomaly stone and traveling to all the different planets. Part of me kind of wanted Gabriel to survive, but in the end, given some things he said throughout Season 6 and the beginning of Season 7, I kind of feel it was poetic that he finally died, feeling like he was ready for death. And ultimately, when Season 7 ends, there's only one child of Gabriel left. A character, the youngest child of Gabriel, from what I can tell, named Luca, who, while he was shot, I think he was shot at, I think he ultimately survived being shot at, and he was the only one of the children of Gabriel who was not killed by the time Season 7 ends, and then he ultimately achieves Transcendence. So we just add one more to, like I said, our count of a little over 600 at this point, and then that just leaves us with one group left to talk about, the Disciples. Alright, so now we're down to the last group of characters from the 100, the Disciples. So, tying back to something I said earlier, in Season 7 we have the flashback episode, which was kind of supposed to be a backdoor pilot to a spin-off show, prequel series that never got picked up, which again was part of the reason why I waited so long to do this video, because I wanted to see if that was ever going to come about, but unfortunately never did. But in the flashback episode, Anaconda, it is said we see the original Second Dawn cultists. Well, the leader didn't want to call them a cult, but they survive. Bill Cadigan, he basically has the bunker under Polis, and of the 12 spaces for 1,200 people, they have 1,104 Second Dawn members survive in the bunker when Apocalypse 1 happens. But then, over the course of a couple of years, several members of the cult are killed off, or Second Dawn are killed off. But then, when Dr. Becca Franco comes down from her station Polaris whenever it gets blown up during Unity Day. She brings with her the Nightblood and the AI flame in her neck. But then, after discovering how the anomaly stone works that Bill Cadigan had, she had first given the option to take the first test for Transcendence, but she refuses. And then she tries to tell Bill Cadigan the truth about it, but then ultimately he decides to kill her. Then Bill Cadigan's daughter, IAP Callie Cadigan, takes the flame, the Nightblood, gives it to a bunch of the members of the Second Dawn, and they go up on the surface, and they're able to survive. And then going back to something I said earlier, my personal headcanon is they were the original tree crew, and then they found 11 other bunkers underground groups they were able to give Nightblood to, and they were the ones who, their descendants became the Grounders population we have. So a few hundred from this bunker, maybe 100 from that bunker, a couple hundred from that bunker, that's how we got Asgata and the other 10 Grounder clans, and then their descendants are all the Grounders when Season 1 begins. But Cadigan and the rest of his followers, which at this point is less than 1,000, but probably at least 700, could be somewhere in there, go from Earth to planet Bardo, because he's able to at least figure out how to use the Anomaly Stone to travel from Earth to Bardo. And he also is able to find a way, because of the time difference, basically almost 1,000 years pass, he gets put in like a cryo sleep, and then his people find a way to prepare for the final test. Well, the last wars, they call it, because they misinterpret the Bardoan text when they took the Transcendence test, mistake it for a war. But they can never really figure out how to activate the Anomaly Stone on Bardo to take the test as well. So I'm going to say that by the time Season 6 actually starts, after the 125-year gap for one crew to get to Alpha/Sanctum, we are once again back to 1,104 disciples. Now, the reason why I say this is there are one or two times I say there are over 1,000 disciples, but keep in mind, they're surviving in essentially another underground bunker city created by the Bardoans, and it's not like they have enough space to fit a huge population in a group. But also there's a line, I think somewhere in Season 7, I forgot which episode it was, where they reveal that by this point they don't need to have children the traditional way. They can just create embryos and then raise them, and then they're not really loved by a parent, but they're raised by the whole group. So since there were 1,104 disciples that survived Apocalypse 1, it wouldn't be too crazy to think that that number is probably sacred to them. So I'm just going to say when Season 6 starts, we have 1,104 disciples. Now, given some flashbacks we see in Season 7, 4 of them are killed during that time where Octavia and Dioza were on Skyring, and because of the whole time difference between all the planets. So then, when Season 6 ends / Season 7 begins, we have 1,100 disciples that are still alive. Then, over the course of Season 7, in the first half, at least 30 are killed. Now, there are, again, the flashbacks between the different timelines are a little confusing, but the only significant kill in Part 1 is Orlando, who was sent to Skyring as punishment, but ultimately he commits suicide after Hope, Echo, and Dr. Gabriel Santiago kill some of his own people and leave him trapped there. Then over the course of the second half of the season, at least another 75 disciples are killed. Anders is killed. He gets stabbed or his throat slashed, and then he gets exposed to the Gem 9, crystallized the same way Charmaine Dioza was. Conductor Giuseppe, I think is how you say his name, he was sent to, I think it was Etheria with Bellamy for an episode, and then he later dies on Sanctum after being exposed to the Red Sun toxin and then gets shot by Clark. And then in the final episode, Bill Cadigan is the one who, after he basically uses a machine to read Maddie Griffin's memories, which leaves her essentially brain dead, but still technically alive. That's why she was able to transcend earlier, something I forgot to mention. He's the one who's going to originally take the test from the judge, who takes the form of his daughter, Callie. But before he can, Clark ends up shooting him in the head. And then we see at least a few dozen disciples killed in the final fight between them and all of one crew and the Elita's prisoners. But by the time Season 7 ends in the finale, I'm going to say at least 990 disciples transcend. And like I said, it could be more than that, because it could be more than 1,104 disciples when the season begins, because we're never getting an exact number to go with. I'm just sticking with that. So if we had at least 100 disciples killed, I'm going to say about 990 transcend in the finale. So And then the only significant disciple that transcends but comes back, he's just one. It's Levitt, who was kind of like a disciple who had kind of sympathetic to the group that was on the planet. He developed feelings for Octavia, and he wanted to come back to be with her and the rest of Clark's people on Earth, because, to paraphrase something like, he really wanted a chance to live, even before they had to face the test or the war. Even though he does get shot by Shade Hada, he ultimately survives. But, like I said, he's the only significant character that transcends and comes back. We do have a bunch of named disciples, many of which were only like 1 or 2 episodes that transcend. All ones I can confirm are Cameron, Disciple Nurse, Emilio, Hayden, Jonah, Kim, Kwame, Lorenzo the Stone Conductor, Miss Hagerman, Sean, Shona, and Zora. Most of them only appeared in like 1 or 2 episodes each, but like I said, they were all named characters that were confirmed to transcend. So now, that's the end of all 10 groups that I had. So given all the different groups we have gone through, from what I can tell, only 14 people are alive when the show ends that form Final Crew. And for my best guess, at least 1,600 people transcend in the final episode of the 100. Most of which, obviously, if it's about, like I said, if it's at least 990 are from the Disciples, and then maybe a little over 500, a little over 600 from all the other groups that combined. So that's my final count. When the show ends, at least 1,600 people, human beings, transcend after Raven faces the judge's test, after Bill Cadigan is shot by Clark when Clark initially fails, but then Raven gets one last chance to take the test, and then also seeing Octavia stop the fighting between the Disciples and all of one crew. Ultimately, that's what it is going to be. Around 1,600, give or take maybe another dozen or so, at least, survive to transcend in the finale. Yeah, there we go. Like I said, this is a long video. I've been spending a year preparing for it, going through it, trying to double-check my math multiple times, looking up every information I could. And that's my final answer of how many people transcended in the 100 series finale. Alright, so that's the end of this video. Like, share, and subscribe if you can. And hopefully, now that I got this out of the way, I can get back to getting more content, because I've been trying to film this on and off again for a while. So I have no idea how long this video is going to be now that I finally finished it. Similar to the Power Rangers and Doctor Who video, but hopefully you like it. And now that I've got it done, I'm going to hopefully start uploading videos regularly again. Alright, have a good day. Take care.